Now on Twitter primarily, because that's where news breaks these days. Shams again. Ricky Rubio has agreed to a 3-year, $51 million deal with the Phoenix Suns. They've been trying to resolve their point guard issue for as far back as I can remember. Remember when they had too many?
Yeah.
They had they had a glut of point guards, and they got rid of all of them at the same time. Then they had no point guard.
And then they passed on a few in the draft.
Yes, and now they have Ricky Rubio, who's a really good complementary player to Devin Booker. Jeremy Lamb has agreed to a 3-year, $31 million deal with the Indiana Pacers. So the Hornets now have lost their top 2 scorers from last season via free agency, Kemba Walker and Jeremy Lamb, who was their number 2 scorer last season in terms of average at least. I believe that makes Marvin Williams their top returning scorer at this point moving forward. Bojan Bogdanović, speaking of scores, agreed to a 4-year, $73 million deal with the Utah Jazz. That is a great fit and a serious blow to the Indiana Pacers.
Yes, that hurt Indiana. Bogdanović is a heck of a player. When he's your third best player, you really got something going right there because this guy can put it on the floor. He can shoot the 3. And Tom, the thing I like about him, he's sneaky. When you walk out on the court as an opposing player and you see him, you're like, he's not quick, he's not a high flyer. But this kid is just fundamentally sound, and he rocked you to death with that triple threat. So I like this.
How about Malcolm Brogdon? Remember, he's a restricted free agent, but Indiana is trading a first-round and 2 future second-round picks to Milwaukee for Brogdon.
Wow.
And this makes a lot of sense. A lot of people had connected Rubio to Indiana because they're looking for a point guard, and now it's Malcolm Brogdon. And I don't know about you guys, I like that fit a lot.
Wow. I'm just surprised he's not headed back to Milwaukee after all that. That's a big deal for Indiana and a big blow to Milwaukee.
Yeah.
So it's
then they agreed to it.
It's a sign and trade, $85 million deal with the Indiana Pacers.
At some point, Milwaukee got to look at their cap and say, hey, we got Giannis coming up in a little while, and how much money you got to spend?
They're in go-for-it mode. It's too early to look at your cap.
That is interesting.
Hey, apparently they are.
And he was a really important player to that Milwaukee Bucks team.
Yeah, wow.
A huge get for Indiana, so kind of a mixed bag for Indiana right now. Bogdanović is gone. Brogdon is there. Now we bring in Reggie Miller, the Hall of Famer, joins us from, I'm assuming, California, but I don't really know. Reg, good to have you with us. We've got so much on the plate here that you could potentially react to, so let's treat it like a buffet. Where do you want to start here?
Well, I'm going to start with what you guys were just alluding to. 18 years in Indiana, it is a wow because Bojan, when Victor Oladipo went down, this essentially became Bojan's team, and he played fantastic. And I agree with Sam. You talk about a guy who was so fundamentally sound. The jabs, being able to knock down threes, he became the Pacers' go-to guy. It's a huge loss for Indiana. But on the flip side, what a gain by getting Malcolm Brogdon. And I agree with you, Tom. It's too early. You're supposed to be all in if you're Milwaukee. Because right now, for the whole summer, what you're going to be doing is shaking your head. You were up 2-0 and really in cruise control versus Toronto in the Eastern Conference Finals. Everyone was anointing Giannis, which he ended up being the MVP, and the Milwaukee Bucks as the new kids on the block. And for them to lose Brogdon, and in my opinion, losing George Hill. George Hill was fantastic during the playoffs. So you lose 2 guys, especially in that backcourt. It's a huge loss for Milwaukee, but I think it is a big game for Milwaukee for Indiana for them to get Malcolm Brogdon because I think he talk about a guy who is steady. I love Malcolm Brogdon's game.
Also lost Nikola Mirotic, who's headed back to Europe. The Bucks have reportedly reached agreements to keep Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez, who got a big deal today as well. All right, the Durant deal, as you know by now, Kevin Durant is headed to Brooklyn. He and Kyrie Irving will team up, not next season more than likely, but the season after that at least. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, I'm not shocked. I thought at the end of the day with, what was it, the max 221 was on the table for him to stay with the Golden State Warriors. I thought having a little bit of that infrastructure in place, knowing that training staff, maybe he did his research on his own. Maybe there's a great training facility, for that Achilles injury that he's going to be rehabbing all year. But I'm not shocked. I think in today's game, players, they want to team up and create these super teams and play with one another. We've heard that, they're very good friends, Kyrie and KD. And so I'm not surprised. You look at this young Brooklyn Nets team, they kind of pushed the Philadelphia 76ers in that first round last year. And though they'll probably be losing D'Angelo Russell, Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, Jared Allen in the middle. So there's going to be pieces for this Nets team. What I like is you're bringing arguably the best player in the game. I know he'll be coming off an Achilles injury, but now we get a little bit more flavor in the East now. It seems like everyone was heading out west. Now, again, the bombshell is still, we're waiting for Kawhi Leonard. He possibly could be going west, but it's nice to have some big dogs in the Eastern Conference now.
Reggie, it's Tom Penn. That's exactly where I wanted to go, was out west into Los Angeles, and get your thoughts on what you think happens there with those two franchises. New York, the story today was all about New York and Brooklyn winning and the Knicks losing. What do you think about what's happening in L.A., and give us your prediction of what's going on there?
I think if I'm Kawhi Leonard, it's a real tough call, because I'm kind of going to harken this back, and I'm going to show my age here, but a lot of you guys can appreciate this. When Kareem Abdul-Jabbar won that championship for the Milwaukee Bucks, kind of went to the front office, a little secret handshake, and said, "I've done my part. I won a championship. Ship me to L.A." And the rest was history, obviously winning those championships with the Lakers. Is that kind of what Kawhi did? I did my part. We won a championship. Now get me to L.A. And obviously he can make the call all he wants, but to kind of go back and run it back, because if he comes back, I do believe they have 7 of their 8 top-tier players would be coming back, with a chance for them to run it back. Now, obviously the Eastern Conference got a little bit more difficult with, Kyrie, but again, KD won't be playing next year. So to me, it would still, if Kawhi was to re-sign with the Raptors, odds on you would have to say that Toronto is the favorite, to win it again, because Golden State, they got weaker. We don't know when Klay's coming back, so now you really only have KD and Draymond. And I know the Lakers got Anthony Davis, but you still got to fill players around them. So the one thing I'm loving about this is parity is back in the NBA. Before, when we would start the season, it was Golden State or the field. There are 10 to 15 teams now, if the dominoes fall in the right direction, where if a team got hot after the All-Star break, they can go on a run, very much like what we saw Toronto do.
Reggie, Sam here. How you doing, my buddy?
I'm doing great, brother.
Reggie, when you look at the success they had in Toronto, Masai Ujiri, the way he put that team together with one All-Star and Kawhi Leonard and a lot of other good players, and he had depth. And you saw in the playoffs the teams that suffered injuries start losing series because they just didn't have the depth. Why don't you think some of these teams that lost out in free agency, like the Knicks and maybe the Clippers, some of these other teams, you think they're going to go back to that mode? Because the NBA is a copycat league. So when all the superstars start going to one team, everybody start trying to get under the cap and create all this cap space. Are you going to see more teams getting back to the basics and doing their job, scouting, drafting players, developing players, and try to look at the Toronto Raptors model and have depth in 8 to 9 players, good players, rather than try to load up with 2 or 3 great players?
You're absolutely right, Sam. I think depth is going to have to play a major factor in all these teams. With the commissioner talking about reducing the season to 58 games, I personally don't see that happening. I think it would be a disgrace if they did that. But at 82 games, look, Kawhi played 60 of them, talking about load management, but played the most minutes come playoff time because he was fresh. So I think teams are going to have to do a better job of scouting and obviously finding depth, because gone are the days, Sam, as you and I played, where it was a 7 or 8 man, possibly 9 man rotation. You've got to go 10 deep, and your starters and your backups, they've got to be interchangeable. And we saw a lot of this with Milwaukee and the success they had. Coach Budenholzer kept minutes down, and we talked about the losses they had of George Hill and Malcolm Brogdon, Mirotic. they were deep. And it was the reason why they were able to sustain that is because they were fresh coming into the playoffs. The same with Toronto. So, yeah, I think all 30 teams are going to have to take a hard look at their scouting department and do a better job now of recruiting those complementary players to have better depth. It's great to have superstars, don't get me wrong. Superstars, at the end of the day, they win championships for you. We saw that in Toronto with one superstar winning a championship. But to me, Van Vliet, Lowry, Ibaka came on at the right time. Marc Gasol, you've got to have good role players with that superstar to win a chip.
Hey, Reg, it's Mike Fratello. Let's take a look at the pairing of Kyrie with Kevin Durant. Kyrie goes from Cleveland to Boston, not happy in Cleveland, not happy in Boston, winds up in Brooklyn. KD goes from Oklahoma City to Golden State, wins the championship. Now he's in Brooklyn. Now these two have to fit together. How do you see that working out?
Well, the sad thing about it is we got to wait just about 2 years until we see this happen.
You're right.
And they're two dynamic players, but here's going to be the age-old question. Both need the ball in their hands to be effective, right? So to me, it's going to be all about the complementary players. You got to surround them with shooting. Joe Harris, currently on the Brooklyn Nets team, I think is a great pick for them. But the other players that were complementary players on this last year's Brooklyn Nets team, they need the ball to be successful. Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert. So it's going to be interesting how this coaching staff, with two huge players that need the basketball to be successful, how they integrate that. Again, we've got to wait 2 years to see. So right now, Kyrie's is going to be given the keys to the kingdom and probably to run this team for next season until KD comes back. But I think people and Brooklyn fans are kind of licking their chops right now to actually have KD on the roster.
And unlike some of the other big names who have already made their decisions, we're going to have to wait a little while, we don't know how long, for Kawhi Leonard to make his call as well. In our last segment, we had Charles Barkley on. I asked him about going to the Clippers versus the Lakers. He's arguing for the Toronto Raptors, which I get. There's an argument to be made there. But let's say, for the sake of this question, Reggie, that the pull of Southern California and his home is too much to ignore. What would your advice be in terms of whether to choose the Clippers or the Lakers in L.A.?
Well, one thing we know about Kawhi is he doesn't care about the fan flare, right? And that would be the Lakers, right? To win a championship in that system in San Antonio under Pop, very underappreciated, that franchise. But all they did was win. If I was Kawhi Leonard, there's so much pressure to win. Because, look, if they don't win, they're going to blame you. They're not going to blame LeBron, and they're probably not going to blame Anthony Davis. They're going to blame Kawhi. To me, that Clippers team is built along the same lines as Toronto. I think if he went to the Clippers, I think he would have a better shot, and the Clippers would have a better shot of winning the Western Conference. Doc is a fabulous coach, and you team him with Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell. I believe they're going to re-sign the big kid, Ivica Zubac or whatever.
Ivica Zubac.
Zubac. I like the Clippers roster because, first of all, it was head-scratching that they made the playoffs in the first place last season, right? And I just think there's something brewing with the Clippers. Don't get me wrong. The number one name in terms of NBA basketball, you think it's the Lakers and it's the Bulls, and obviously you have LeBron James, the generational player. But the Clippers have something special going on. So if you're asking me, if he was to come home and choose from the LA teams, personally, I would choose the Clippers.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Reg, you can get back on your bike now.
Thank you.
All right, Reg.
We'll talk to you soon. That's the Hall of Famer Reggie Miller with us here on Free Agent Fever, presented by AT&T. And much more to talk about. The contract details keep coming in. We'll try to keep up as best we can here on a frantic first day of free agency.